Talk to me about sort of sentiment in New York. Has that changed over the last, call it 5 years to over the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit, and we'll stay in the multifamily realm. We have this very convoluted rent regulation system, rent control, rent stabilization, and the laws, it seems like every year the laws got a little bit more pro-tenant, anti-landlord, and then in 2019 we had a very significant change to the laws. Really, it's a shame that it's misguided policy, actually, because I take you back to the late 70s, 1977, Yankees, Dodgers in the World Series, Reggie's hitting all the home runs. Goodyear blimp pans out from Yankee Stadium. There are fires going on within a few blocks of the stadium. And the reason was, back in those times, the dilapidation rate in New York City housing was 14%, meaning that 14% of the apartments were in such bad shape they were deemed uninhabitable.
Wow.
So it made sense for folks to burn their building down as opposed to investing in it.
No way.
So smartly, the policymakers created two programs. The Major Capital Improvement Program and the Individual Apartment Improvement Program, which basically returned a 30% return to invested capital into the buildings by being able to raise rents. And what happened was the private sector dumped tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock because of these two programs. And so in 2019, that dilapidation rate was 0.04%.
Wow.
Quality of the housing stock was great. And in the 2019 rule changes, a number of things went against owners, including marginalizing both of those programs, such that today, when a rent-stabilized apartment becomes vacant and the tenant was paying $700 a month, and in the old pre-2019, the owner would completely gut renovate that apartment, put it on the market, rented for $4,000. Today, that apartment is nailed shut, because you can only invest a limited amount of capital and you can only raise the rent $58 a month.
Wow.
So if you have an apartment that you know inherently is worth $4,000 a month, why would you rent it for $758 a month?
Right.
It makes no sense. The housing policy has impacted the market very, very profoundly. And what has happened, and this started in 2018 when the politicians who actually drafted these bills were talking about what they were going to do. It scared a lot of the New York folks. We have so many clients that for decades would only buy New York City multifamily. If you had a building in New Jersey or Westchester, they wouldn't look at it. New York City, it's all we're buying. I'd say 85 to 90% of those buyers will not buy an apartment building in New York anymore because of these changes. So for a couple of years, 18, 19, 20, 20 even, I'd get a call a month from a client say, hey, Bob, I'm buying a great multifamily in Miami. Omar doesn't know who I am. Could you call him and put in the good word for me?
Yeah.
And I hated getting those calls. Now I don't get those calls ever because these folks have been investing in the local market so frequently, everybody knows them. But we have a lot of new capital coming into the market because I think, for my entire career, cap rates on New York City multi were 150, 200 basis points lower than they were around the country. In 2020, that inverted. Today, I think cap rates in New York are higher than they are around the country, mainly because all of this capital left New York, drove cap rates down everywhere else. And now we have a whole bunch of new folks coming and they sold their property in Nashville at a 4 cap and they're buying a 6 cap in New York. It's really remarkable how it's changed. So the whole landscape of the multifamily business in New York has changed completely. And there's the 10 to 15% of those old New York families and high net worth investors that are doubling down and tripling down on New York. There is a wave of new, younger investors, folks in their 20s and 30s that are buying, hoping that the political pendulum will swing back into somewhat of an owner's favor. But it's really a shame. Every policymaker in New York will say, we want rents to be lower. We want housing to be more affordable for everybody. Yet every single piece of legislation that's been implemented or ignored since 2018 has done exactly the reverse. It's constricted supply. It's inhibited the ability to build new buildings. It's made the owner who has that $700 apartment nail the door shut when the client leaves, as opposed to renovating it and putting it on the market. I think the solution to all of New York's housing problems are on the supply side. You look at the pandemic, and I have this conversation with politicians all the time. Look at the pandemic. People left the city, vacancy rose. Vacancy rising is tantamount to increased supply. Rents dropped 30% in Manhattan. 30%.
Wow.
You want to make the city more affordable, increase the supply, rents will go down. It seems like we can't get anybody to get on board with that. Ultimately, it will have to happen, because what's happening now that we're several years into this disincentive to invest in properties, the condition of the properties is getting worse.
Right.
Once the tenants start complaining, once their local council person meets with them and they say, hey, our building is falling apart, do something about it, you're going to say, well, hey, the policies we put in created this. We have to change it.